Thanks, Tucker. I saw a couple of our friends from the press gallery have a smile when you were getting into the free press. So I might ask Paul Sakal from the Sydney Morning Herald to ask a question.
Great, thank you.
Well, you've almost thanks for your speech.
Of course,
Mr. Carlson. The media can be extremely negative, so it's nice to hear uplifting comments about our country.
It's an amazing country.
It is, and I think we forget that in Australia oftentimes, so I appreciate that. You've preempted my question on Putin.
Putin!
Which I think you did strategically because you knew it's what we'd ask.
Putin! He's so bad!
And I also appreciate that...
Did he make you take the COVID shot?
Take the what?
The COVID shot? No, he didn't. Sorry.
The COVID shot saved probably tens of millions.
Oh, yeah, and definitely. Safe and effective. This is why everyone loves the media.
Probably 100 times more lives than Putin has killed in Ukraine.
It's like a time capsule. It's like you're like the last Japanese soldier on Okinawa. You think the war's still going. No, it didn't save millions of lives. It's hilarious. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm being boorish.
Can I get the full answer in without interruption?
Okay, I beg your pardon.
I'm interested in your position on Putin. Many people in this crowd would adore conservative prime ministers in this country like John Howard, Tony Abbott, mainstream right-wingers like Boris Johnson, Australian Liberals, some of their MPs are in the crowd, are vehemently anti-Putin. They believe he's a reprehensible figure who doesn't believe in the values of conservatism, such as the rule of law and democracy, which gives us the freedoms we have in our countries. I'm interested... Do you feel any level of shame or regret that you were termed a useful idiot, and then post your interview, Vladimir Putin himself said in his Russian media that he was surprised at how weak your questions were, and he also said that you were wrong when you said that no other journalist had asked to interview him. He said that's not true. We only thought Tucker was the only person to report fairly.
Wait, I thought that you were describing Putin as a psychopathic liar, and yet now you're taking his word for things.
Do you?
I mean, let me just quickly unpack your absurd soliloquy if I can. First, I'm stuck on the idea that Boris Johnson is a right winger. Do you know Boris Johnson? I do. Boris Johnson is a criminal buffoon who, like so many who claim to love Ukraine, is single-handedly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men in this war that Ukraine cannot win. And I would refer you to Wikipedia. How many more people does Russia have than Ukraine? Do you know? 100 million. 100 million. And in a land war, that's a relevant number. It is not possible for Ukraine to beat Russia. The best they can do is sue for peace. That's been known, including by Zelensky, who wanted that since the early days of this conflict. And Boris Johnson, on orders from the Biden administration, shut down, and this is not a disputed fact, this is a fact, admitted by everybody now, shut down the peace negotiations almost 2 years ago. And Ukraine has been completely destroyed. And now Zelensky has passed a law allowing foreign corporations to own land there. So you tell me what Ukraine is going to look like in 30 years when all of it is owned by BlackRock and multinational corporations and its population is not Ukrainian, okay? So the tragedy of what's happened in Ukraine, orchestrated by the Western powers, including your government, and I hope you do, and driven by my government, I feel shame about it, I hope you do too, is really one of the great crimes of my lifetime. So the idea that somehow if you're against that, you're for Putin, well, of course, that's absurd. And by the way, speaking of your friend Boris Johnson, he attacked me, of course, ad hominem, and so I called him. He was a journalist, not surprisingly, a man of low character, not shocking. And so I called him and I said, well, you've called me all these names. Why don't you sit down for a conversation? I happen to be in your rainy, depressing slum, London, and we could have a conversation. And he said, I won't do that unless you pay me $1 million. That's a fact. That's a non-disputed fact. I have the text messages. So if that is the credible source of the slur that, look, if I were a toady of Putin or I loved Putin, I would just say so. Because why do I care? I've already been fired. I don't work for anybody. I have no incentive. And by the way, it's perfectly fine if people love Putin. Well, I don't understand what that has to do with anything. We are citizens of different countries. We should judge first and foremost our own leaders. How's our country doing? How are my children doing? What's their future look like? None of that has anything to do with Putin, except to the extent that you all, this country, sit back, your government allows the Biden administration to push us into nuclear war, which is where we are right now, right on the cusp of it. And somehow that's not a story. That is that Putin doesn't respect human rights or the rule of law. Okay, well, just today, Julian Assange was released after 12 years. 12 years in custody. And your government did nothing. The UK made it possible, and the United States demanded it. You tell me how that's consistent with the rule of law or democracy. It's not. It's ruled by the intel agencies. It's lawlessness, and it's a crime. So I'm not saying that we're morally equivalent to Putin. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is our concern should be first and foremost, how are our countries run? And we give our own leaders a pass time and time again because they point to some other creep on the world stage and say, he's bad. Kim Jong-un is bad. Well, yeah, of course he's bad. That's why I don't live in North Korea. That's why I don't live in Russia. I have no interest in living in Russia. But the point is, you're bad too. And the fact that he's bad does not allow you to continue being bad. What? And the last thing I will say that I really feel deeply and I really resent on an emotional level, and you'll pardon my passion. I don't know you. I'm sure we'd be very close friends if we did know each other. But I really resent what I have seen across the West in the past 15 years, and it's a sea change from my youth when my father was a reporter, this alignment between media organizations and the government. I find disgusting, actually. I think it's a perfect inversion of what you're supposed to do. If you're a journalist, your job is to challenge power on behalf of the powerless. It is not to align with the powerful against the powerless. And that is precisely what you have done. I watched your ABC this morning in my hotel room for about 20 minutes until I looked around for a vomit bag. And I watched, it was one of the most grotesque, I couldn't even believe it was real. The first story, this is unbelievable. The first story was Assange. God bless them. That is the biggest story. The second story was a family of 4 found dead in a house. I think in a suburb of Sydney, but it may have been Melbourne. I beg your pardon. But 4 Australians found dead of what they suspected was a drug OD. Apparently they've been taking a new synthetic opioid that has emerged in Australia and is killing people. Now, this is a huge problem where I live, much bigger than here, but I'm familiar with it. And the reporter said it's probably the synthetic opioid and it's been seen and they're dead. On to the next story. The next story was the Australian government's new law that will require a prescription to buy nicotine products. And we were treated to a 15-minute lecture on ABC, whatever the hell that is, about how nicotine is dangerous and we need to keep it out of the hands of Australians. And I'm like, wait a second. Nicotine, first of all, is not dangerous. That's not true. It's factually incorrect. You know nothing about the science, A. B, compared to what? Compared to what? Oh, we have this new synthetic opioid that's killing people. The government, not too concerned. What they're really concerned about is that people might be using nicotine, which, by the way, has the byproduct of raising testosterone levels and making people a little harder to command. That's a massive threat. So this is the point where the media gets involved and says, wait a second, let's chart the death toll from vaping versus fentanyl. Maybe one's a little worse than the other. And what exactly are you doing about it? Why don't you press your ministers and your prime minister? What are you doing about it, about drug use? And the answer is nothing. Instead, they're hassling adults who want to use nicotine, which I would highly recommend to every person in this room as a life-enhancing, God-given chemical. That's just my view. But I'm like, a media should be like holding these people to the fire on that, or the vax injuries and deaths, which are manifold. They're everywhere. Are you joking? And in like countries that actually believe in science, and there are a few in Europe, they're looking at every vaccine causes injuries, every single one. One of my children was injured by a flu vaccine. This is known. In the United States, we're not allowed to sue. We can sue makers of playground equipment, totally fine. We can sue anybody for anything. Gun manufacturers, you cannot sue vaccine manufacturers. And every vaccine causes injuries, every single one, and there's a database publicly available in the United States that shows you how many. And the COVID vax, the mRNA vax from Pfizer, has caused more injuries than all self-reported injuries than all the previous vaccination campaigns for the last 50 years combined. And no one in the media has written a story about it. Because, well, there are a couple reasons. One is that Pfizer is one of the largest advertisers on television in the United States. And the point is not to sell the product. And I worked in television my whole life, so this is not speculation. The point is not to sell some weird drug for rheumatoid arthritis to TV viewers, because people can't prescribe their own drugs. No, that's not the point. This is not a retail sales pitch. This is an insurance policy that the drug makers are buying with the big media companies. We're your biggest advertiser. Maybe if we have a lot of vax injuries from a brand new product, you won't say too much, and they don't. I think that's completely corrupt and shameful. And I have to say, I was fired over a year ago, so I don't have to worry about this or be defensive about it because I don't have a job. So there is a certain freedom in unemployment. And so I sympathize with you guys who work for these companies that are truly corrupt, and you sort of know that, but you don't want to deal with it because you've got kids and a mortgage. I get it. I've been there. But let's just be honest. Everybody else knows what it is. Everyone else knows how corrupt you are. And so there's a reason they have contempt for you. I'm just saying.
Thanks, Tucker. On that note, I might pass you over to Andrew Green from the ABC.
Oh, I love it. You gonna take my nicotine? It's dangerous.
Good afternoon, Tucker.
A prescription for nicotine. Okay.
I missed that segment this morning.
It's shocking. You should watch it. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen on television.
I do want to ask about a country you haven't mentioned today, and that's China. But before that, I wanted your response to the former Vice President, Mike Pence, who has tweeted in the past hour or so that the Assange developments are a miscarriage of justice by the Biden administration and that Assange endangered the lives of our troops.
Can I just apologize for something that I said, and it's my fault. When I ascribed sort of all badness to the Biden administration, that's actually not true. The worst things that happen in our capital city are a bipartisan effort, and they are. That's just a fact. And so I don't want to be partisan and claim it's all the Democrats' fault. It's absolutely not. On the worst things that are happening in America, immigration and pointless wars and COVID policy, it was both parties, guys like Mike Pence, aligning with guys. Well, Joe Biden's not a person anymore, but the people around Joe Biden. And, the truth is, you want to know the actual truth? I won't be boorish, but Mike Pompeo was Trump's CIA director. And it emerged, and it's factual, that as CIA director, when Assange was locked in the Ecuadorian embassy for however many, 7 years or something, that he plotted to murder him. And Assange had never been charged with any crime in the United States at all. And under our system and yours, you can't just murder people because they embarrass you. So Assange leaked CIA secrets, and Pompeo, as director of CIA, plotted to murder him. That's a fact. And the remarkable thing is that no one arrested Mike Pompeo. He's still walking free. This is a guy who plotted a murder. He's a federal bureaucrat. In a democracy, federal bureaucrats, people just appointed to a job as a political favor, can't just kill other people they don't like. That's not allowed. Speaking of Russia, and yet this is aimed at my country, people are like, no, that's totally reasonable. Pompeo's an upstanding guy. No, he's not. He's a criminal. He's a criminal. And he tried to murder the guy who exposed his crimes. It's super simple. It's what the mafia used to do. It's why they won every jury trial. Killed 2 jurors, the others acquit. And he tried to do that. And it blows my mind. And I think Mike Pence is a sad, weak man, but I think that's an incredibly shameful tweet. I read it, and I was enraged by it. And I'm just sorry that I didn't describe the problem in greater detail previously.
I'll get on to China now. You may or may not be aware of a strategic partnership Australia is involved with your country and the United Kingdom called AUKUS, where we will get nuclear-powered submarines. Can I get your assessment of that? And it was largely in response to China. Do you think China poses a threat here?
I think that, first of all, I think it's very complicated, but I think the overview is this. China has 1.4 billion people and not enough resources or land. Australia has 26 million people and a sparsely populated continent that is brimming, overflowing with resources that countries with expanding economies need. And I don't know how expensive your politicians are. I'm guessing not very. So I don't think it would be too much of a lift for China to just buy them all, and I assume they already are doing that. I mean, obviously they are doing that, and they're doing that in my country too. They bought the current president's son. So I'm not mad at China for that. Well, they did. They bought Hunter Biden. I mean, that's the whole story. and it's proven. Okay, so I'm not mad at China about that. Just for the record, I'm not particularly anti-China. I don't want to live in China. It's not my system at all, and I find a lot of parts of the culture repugnant. On the other hand, I see China, a country acting in its own interest. So I'm not mad about that. I'm mad about the countries like my own and possibly yours that allow themselves to be taken advantage of. That's the truly shameful thing. So I just don't hate China. I see a rapidly growing country that will do whatever it can to help itself. And if it crushes people in the way, it will. Okay. So that's pretty reasonable. That's kind of a time-tested model. Your job is not to be crushed. And so I'd be very, very, very concerned about it. I don't think you face an imminent invasion or anything. I do think that the concerns about China, just the size differential, the resource question, population, these are the fears that have pushed generations of Australian governments into a counterproductive alliance with the United States and Great Britain. I think the view here is that the U.S. will rescue us if we ever really have a problem. And I don't think that's true. I'm sorry to say that. And I'm just saying that as I just don't think it's true. And I think you're unwise for believing it's true. And I think a lot of people on Taiwan thought that was true. It turns out not to be true. I think a lot of Pashtuns in Afghanistan thought that was true. A lot of Montagnards in Vietnam thought that was true. A lot of Christian Iraqis thought that was true. And all of them learned the hard way that it's not true. That in the end, countries act in their own interest. And in a democratic system, leadership changes every 4 or 8 years with different views, expressing, evolved opinions from the public. So no democratic country can be longitudinally reliable as a partner simply because its government changes so often. That's just a fact. It's not an attack. I'm not attacking the United States. I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying if you think that allowing the U.S. government to stage, foreign troops on your soil, they didn't beat you in a war, did they? Then why do they have foreign troops here? I'm sorry. I know I'm offending everybody. It's just a fact. And I don't know if that's like a huge part of your economy, but like rule one in my country is we don't have foreign troops on our soil because we're a sovereign country. And I don't understand why all these countries allow it. I love the United States. I'm glad, that we've got the whip hand, I guess. But I don't think any country should put up with that. No, you can't have soldiers in my country. Go away. You know what I mean? Like, we can be friends, but having troops on my soil suggests not a friendship, but a master-slave relationship. And I'm just not into it at all. And I don't think you should be into it either.
Thanks, Tucker. One final question from the press gallery. Kat Wong from AAP.
Hi, Tucker. Thank you so much for your address today. So you talked a little bit about immigration, and in the past you've talked about how white Australians, Americans, Europeans are being replaced by non-white immigrants in what is often referred to as the Great Replacement Theory. This is the same...
Have I said that whites are being replaced?
Well...
I don't think I said that.
Well, it's been mentioned on your show 4,000 times. And
really, when did I say that?
On your show.
I said whites are being replaced?
You have said that before.
Really?
Yeah.
I would challenge you to cite that because I'm pretty sure I haven't said that. I said native-born Americans are being replaced, including blacks.
Native-born Americans.
Native-born Americans. And Americans black Americans have been, African Americans have been in the United States for, in many cases, their families over 400 years. And their concerns are every bit as real and valid and alive to me as the concerns of white people whose families have been there 400 years. So I've never said that whites are being replaced. Not one time. And you can't cite it.
Untrue.
So we just met, but when our relationship starts with a lie, it makes it tough to be friends. So
you've been lying
let's
about
pull
my
that back.
press
I'm happy
gallery
to explain what I
as
do
well,
think.
So.
Well, you actually can't cite it because I didn't say it, and I don't believe it. And I'm telling you that to your face, so why don't you just accept me at face value? My concern is that the people who are born in the country are the main responsibility of its leaders. And as noted earlier, when those leaders shift their concern from the people whose responsibility it is to take care of to people around the world to put their priorities above that of their own citizens, that's immoral. And they are being replaced in my country, people who are born in the United States. And the birth rate tells the whole story. They are not at replacement rate. And so the U.S. population is growing because we're importing people from other countries. And my view is that happy people have children, and a functioning economy allows them to do that. And we don't have that. And so you need to fix the economy and fix the culture and make it so that people who want to have kids can. You don't just go for the quick sugar fix of importing new people. Like, that's my position. And if you think that's racist, that's your problem.
I never called you a racist.
But of course you are suggesting, and I must say one of the reasons people don't like people like you in the media is that you never say exactly what you mean. Your slurs are all by implication, and you're about to tell me the great replacement theory is racist or anti-Semitic, whatever. I've said what I've said to you right now like 100 times in public. I hope to, if I live long enough, say it 100 more times. I think it's completely honest and real, not racist or scary. It's factually true. It's not a theory, it's a fact. And the whole point of your question was to be like, you're a scary racist.
Well, I haven't
And
actually
my
finished my
response is,
question.
no, I'm not. Okay, well, how about no more lying in your questions, and then I'll answer it.
Okay. Well, this is the same theory, or as you say, idea, that has inspired the New York Buffalo shooting where 11 black Americans were killed.
On.
2
You know
white
what I mean?
Americans were killed.
Like,
And it's also
okay,
inspired...
it's not, first of all...
It's inspired one of the worst Australian guns
How do
of
they
all
get
time
people
to
this
shoot
stupid in the media? I guess it doesn't pay well. Look, I'm sorry. I've lived among people like you for too long, and I don't mean to call you stupid. Maybe you're just pretending to be, but I'm totally against violence. I'm totally against the war in Ukraine, for example, which doubtless you support. And like all dutiful liberals, support more carnage. I don't. I hate mass shootings, actually. Nothing I said, what does it mean to inspire something? My views are not bigoted against any group. They're honest. They're factual. That's not hate. That's reality. And my views derive from my deep concern for Americans, actually. Americans aren't having kids because they can't afford to. And nobody in charge cares. And so that's my position. That doesn't inspire mass shootings. How dare you try to tie me to some lunatic who murdered people? How dare you, actually? And in fact, I mean, do you know what I mean? I'd be like, Hitler wore those shoes. A lot of people are saying that you're like Hitler. Can you explain those shoes? Hitler wore exactly the same shoes, and you're like, I've got nothing to do with Hitler. Well, that's how I feel about your absurd, disingenuous question.
Right, so therefore you support gun control?
What? I thought it couldn't
don't
get
want any more
dumber, but it
shootings?
did. No, I don't support disarming law-abiding people so they can't defend themselves. So the government has a monopoly on violence? I don't think so. First of all, in my country, that's illegal, as you know. But moreover, it should be illegal in every country. A sovereign person has the right to defend himself and his family. Period. And that said, I'm totally opposed to harming anyone. Are you concerned about the war in Ukraine? And the countless innocents being murdered there every single day? I doubt you are. Probably Putin bad. I am. I'm a Christian. I hate violence. I hate mass shootings. I have guns at home, and often on my person when I'm in the United States, I'm proud to say, because I want to defend myself and those I love against violence. That's the point. I'm not perpetrating crimes. I'm not shooting strangers. I'm defending what I love. And if you're against that, I guess I would ask why. Why would you be against that?
Well, so you don't think you harbor any kind of responsibility for these hate crimes?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to be charitable. I was like, maybe you're just pretending to be dumb. Now I don't think it's an act.
Tucker, thank you for taking those questions. I'm sure you enjoyed some
Actually, I
questions from the
loved it. I
press.
just feel sorry. I mean, because I got here and the country's so unbelievably beautiful and the people are so cheerful and funny and cool and smart. I'm like, your media's got to be better than ours. It can't just be a bunch of castrated robots reading questions from the boss. And then it turns out it's exactly the same, maybe even a tiny bit dumber.